Soufflés have the reputation of the divas of the dessert world. They're temperamental. You have to tiptoe around the house when you're baking one, or else they'll fall. Luckily, unlike many Hollywood divas, the stories are mostly untrue. As long as you have the right recipe and a little know-how, you can make a chocolate soufflé that's basically foolproof, tall, light and fluffy, with a creamy molten interior. We found that making soufflés in individual dishes works a lot better than making large soufflés, which don't bake very evenly. To make a soufflé, you need a straight-sided dish. And we are both going to butter it and sugar it. This helps the soufflé rise up the sides. The butter makes it slip up the sides, and the sugar gives it some traction. So you can pour a bunch into the first one, and then let it fall into the second one as you butter all the sides. To prepare the oven for the soufflés, it's important to put the rack of the oven in the lower third. This gives room for the soufflés to rise and ensures that the tops don't get too brown. Then let's program the oven to 375 with plenty of time to heat, so the oven is nice and hot when we're ready to start. So a soufflé is made of two elements: a pastry cream, which is what carries the flavor, and you can flavor it in many ways, and whipped egg whites. So the whipped egg whites will lighten that cream and create the bubbles that allow a soufflé to rise. So we're going to make the pastry cream now. We have some milk and egg yolk, which are the heart of any pastry cream. And we're going to add some sugar, cornstarch to thicken it. This chocolate soufflé is going to get part of its flavoring at the end from chocolate, but we're putting a little cocoa into the mixture now, and a little bit of salt. Salt is always nice in a sweet preparation. It kind of brings up the sugar, balances it, enhances it a little bit. So now I'm going to cook the pastry cream over medium heat, whisking as it comes to a simmer. See, now it's starting to thicken very quickly, but it's becoming a bit lumpy too, which we expect. So now we're just whisking it for a minute or two to let it smooth out again and to cook the cornstarch. I'm going to turn it down a little bit. It's very important to cook the cornstarch because otherwise when you take it off the heat, it could, as it cools, thin down again. All right, I think that's about right. So now to continue with the flavoring of our pastry cream, we're going to add some chocolate that's been chopped finely. I find this very easy to do in the food processor, but you can do it by hand as well. Let's add that in. And as you stir it in, you can give it a minute for the pieces to melt before you try and stir it till it's smooth. A little vanilla and a tablespoon of butter. So again, we're going to stir this till it's nice and smooth. Give the chocolate a chance to melt. So this will be a very nice chocolate soufflé. But if you want to make any other soufflé, then you just change the flavor of the pastry cream. And we've given you a few examples for that. Here we go. So now we're going to cool the pastry cream. It's important to cool it so that when we add the meringue doesn't deflate. So we want it to be at least as cool as room temperature. Now we'll scrape the pastry cream into a bowl and set that bowl into a larger bowl of ice water. Careful not to have too much water, it'll slosh out. So this, we'll give it a stir, I think, just with the pastry spatula. So we'll leave this for about 10 minutes and just stir it occasionally. So now our chocolate pastry cream is about room temperature, which is fine. You don't need it any colder than that. So I'm going to take it out of the bowl, out of my ice bath, so it's more stable and ready for me to mix in my meringue, which I'm about to make. So some things to keep in mind when you're making the meringue is the egg whites are best at room temperature. They thin out a little bit as they warm up, and that helps them whip to their fullest volume. So we're going to do this on high. And you see, just as it gets foamy, I'm going to add the cream of tartar, which will help to stabilize the egg whites. So now we're about its off peaks, which is perfect, and I'm going to start adding the sugar a tablespoon at a time. Now I want to whip it until it holds stiff, glossy peaks. Okay, I think we're good. Now, if your egg whites are a little bit under, it's good to finish it by hand. You can hold this in your fingers and just give it a couple of turns so that it holds. That's good, perfect. So there are several things to keep in mind when you are mixing the egg whites with the pastry cream. The pastry cream is very dense, so we want to loosen this up. If you've chilled this overnight, stir it up so it's loose, and then we're going to add about a third of the whites. So stirring this first bit of egg whites in is a necessary sacrifice. You can see that it's deflating the egg whites, but it will help loosen this mixture enough and lighten it enough so that we'll be able to add the rest of the egg whites easily. So you don't have to be careful here. You can just keep stirring it until it's uniform in color. There we go. So now it's a little bit more like a chocolate mousse. And we'll start adding some more of our egg whites in 2 batches. Okay, for the first batch, you can either start at the edge of the bowl and slowly bring the spatula up through the middle of the pastry cream, or, as I prefer, start in the middle and bring it up to the edge. In either case, this helps to incorporate the egg whites, and you move the bowl around slowly in a circle as you do that so that you get all of the different parts. And we'll stop before it's completely even. It's okay to have some streaks here. We'll worry about getting rid of them when we put in the end of the egg whites. Okay, so now I'm going to add the rest of the egg whites. Put them all out of there. Okay, so again, fold from the center to the outside, or the outside to the center, picking up all of the thicker batter that's in the middle on the bottom. And now we do want to get it so that it's totally uniform. Any streaks that are left at this point you will actually see in the finished soufflé, so that's why it's important to have it be well mixed. Then it looks really luscious, like a good chocolate mousse. So now we're going to fill the ramekins. We want them full so we can flatten the tops. Just get enough in here to make it full. So then with an offset spatula, you can smooth it flat. So some people use their index finger, but I like to use my thumb to create the channel around the edge, which helps the soufflé to run straight up. There we go. And now we're ready to bake our soufflés. We have them on a rimmed baking sheet, which makes it easier to take them in and out of the oven. And they'll bake for about 15-20 minutes until they're risen about an inch, and then we'll check them. And there, it's just wet on the tip. That's what we're looking for. And they're ready. The soufflés will deflate soon after you take them out of the oven, so you want to serve them as quickly as possible. But we are going to put some powdered sugar on them first. This wonderful little spoon helps. So now let's check out the texture. Lovely, little moist inside, and nice and chocolatey.